The 23 Racing and Furman Motorsports NASCAR trial is set for December 1st, and there's no progress toward a settlement, and it seems like there will be some sort of playoff format for NASCAR 2026. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got on NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into this really quickly. We've only got one paint scheme to take a look at, and it's a 2026 Rotor scheme that we'll see for Ross Chastain, Justin Allgaier, Connor Zolch, and Carson Quaffle throughout the 2026 season. This scheme looks very similar to one we saw, I believe, for Justin Allgaier 2025. Same thing for Connor Zolch as well, and also Carson Quaffle in the 2025 season. To be honest, I think the scheme does look solid. I like the colors on the car in general. I think Junior Motorsports knocked this one out of the park. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack in 2026 around the 2026 year and season. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Garage 56. Now, many of you have been probably seeing a lot of clips and photos of it surfacing in Fuji, but the Garage 56 car that's basically ran, of course, at Le Mans in 2023 is once again spotted at Fuji. There was some big stuff going on. You had the Chevrolet version of it there, and you also had the Toyota version of it there as well. Multiple Legacy Motor Club drivers, Eric Jones, Jimmy Johnson, also believe people from 23 Racing were there as well to represent the car at Fuji. Also, Kumi Kobayashi, of course, is a legend of Japan, but also, of course, is a driver who's driven for 23 Racing in the past. He also was there as well. This is a really big deal. Obviously, Garage 56 was a massive deal for NASCAR. When you look at TikTok, when you look how big Garage 56 was, I think that this was a really, really huge deal for the sport, how big Garage 56 was. It brought the sport, in my opinion, into a much better position in general. I like seeing stuff like this, and I think it's pretty cool that Garage 56 got represented in some way, shape, or form. I like seeing stuff like this in general. I think it's really exciting, and I think it's cool that we got the chance and opportunity to see Garage 56 in some way, shape, or form at Fuji recently. It would also be pretty cool in the future if NASCAR could go back and race in Japan in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about F1 Academy. As it was announced earlier today that F1 Academy has signed an extension and will continue through the 2027 season. It was also confirmed as well that Cadillac will field a two-car team once again in the 2026 year as well, and they will be joining the F1 Academy in the upcoming year. This is a really big deal. The F1 Academy, of course, I believe, replaced the W1 series that Formula One used to have not too long ago, and it became the F1 Academy, and Susie Wolf is the one who manages that group. This is a really huge deal for the F1 Academy. There's been a lot of drivers who've had success. Leah Block just won her first race not too long ago. Dorian Penn also, I believe, won a championship in F1 Academy, I'm pretty sure. So it's a big deal to see the series will continue for the next couple of years, and it's also given drivers in the series an opportunity to go try out and do different things, and has brought other drivers in to try different things as well. So I think the F1 Academy has been able to bring some decent success, in my opinion, and pretty cool that it will continue through the 2027 season. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin J. Hill. As it looks like, according to a post he put out yesterday, it looks like Austin J. Hill is very close to announcing his 2026 NASCAR plans. Now, he put out a tweet, and it looks like he did announce his 2026 plans, but when you actually look at the tweet a lot closer, he hasn't really announced anything at this point for 2026. But if you take a look at the post he put out, it looks like he'll likely be back with Joey Gase Racing in the 2026 year. That team is expected to run, I believe, two cars in the 2026 season. They kind of put a post out who you think will be with our program next year. And it looks like, from what I've heard, that Austin J. Hill is a front runner to drive for this team once again. He made a few starts in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series in 2025. And it's going to be cool if he does get the chance and opportunity to be back in the series once again in 2026. So we'll see if he does get the opportunity to run once again. I think he'll be a factor and contender. Maybe get some top 30s and some top 25s. He's a decent road course driver in general. So I think he's got potential of being decent. We'll see how it goes, and we'll see if he can perform really solid and really good next year with the organization in the 2026 season with the organization. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Louis Foster. As it was announced a couple days ago that Louis Foster has signed a multi-year contract extension with Rahal Linderman Lanigan Racing to continue driving a number 45 car starting in the 2026 season. Louis Foster did have a contract, I believe, RLL Racing for the 2026 year, but it's been unknown how long the contract does go for him to be with that program past 2026. But we now know for sure he'll be with the program at least least for the foreseeable future. This solid decision, in my opinion. I think Louis Foster had a solid rookie season in IndyCar. I know he didn't really contend for wins and victories, but generally, historically, rookies don't go out there and contend for wins. But I think he has some flashes and shows some flash of brilliance throughout the year, and I think he's got potential to be a really good driver in the sport. And if the RL Racing team can continue to improve, there is a potential possibility that this scheme could really go to the next level and show some good stuff in 26. So I'm excited about this and excited to see what he can do. We're also still waiting on who is going to drive the 30 car next year. Rumors are that Mick Schumacher is going to get behind the wheel of that car in 2026, though nothing's officially finalized, but exciting for Louis Foster. Congratulations, Louis Foster, on getting the chance and opportunity to continue working with this team next year. We'll see if we can have a strong and good season with RL Racing in 26. Glad to see he's getting the chance and opportunity to stay with the program next year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about USA Network. As it was confirmed yesterday that NASCAR races that have been on USA Network will be moving over to a new different type of thing in 2026. There, of course, were some questions around whether NASCAR races would go on the new NBC Sports Network for 2026, but that will not be the case for next year. I believe only the NBA and I believe the MLB are going to be on the NBC Sports Network, but properties like I think the Premier League, I'm pretty sure, I think it was announced today the Pac-12 will also be on this network in 2026, but also we've been wondering what other things could be involved with the USA Network, and USA Sports is coming in, and all the races that are not on NBC will be on USA Sports in 2026 as they've kind of broken off the versant for next year. To be honest, it's very clear that NASCAR signed a terrible TV deal. I think we all kind of agree on that at this point, and I just, looking at some of the start times, and we'll talk about that here in just a short little bit, I do truly believe that more races do need to be on NBC because they're not going to promote the NASCAR races on NBC when the NFL games are going on because they had issues even doing that this year. They were promoting the New Hampshire race after the New Hampshire race concluded. I remember people talk about this. Jared talked about this on his channel. So to me, I just think that there needs to be better promotion. I'm not the biggest fan of this move, but I'm not surprised. I do think it would have made a lot more sense to be on the NBC Sports Networks. I think that made a lot more sense, but unfortunately that's not the case. Sadly, at this time, I'm not a big fan of it, but I'm not shocked and surprised to see that it will not be happening for 2026, but it's sad news overall that it won't be happening. They'll be going to NBC Sports. I wish it was happening, but it will unfortunately not be happening next year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Leigh Diffey. As it was confirmed by, I believe, the Speed Cafe account late last night that Leigh Diffey will be joining the Supercars broadcast for the Adelaide Grand Final in a couple weekends from now. The Adelaide Grand Final is going to be a really big deal. You have drivers running like Austin Cindric who's going to compete. There was a chance and opportunity that Connor Zilch was going to have the opportunity to run this event as well, but that deal fell through from the Chevrolet side. But now you have Leigh Diffey who will get the chance an opportunity to call the races in Adelaide. This is a great decision in my opinion. I think Leigh Diffey is one of the best commentators we've seen, not just in the US, but also I think across the world in general. He's called Formula One races in the past for NBC. He's also called other big races like the Indianapolis 500, was with IndyCar for many, many years, and now gets a chance and opportunity to go back into an area where he, I think, has had experience calling supercar races, I'm pretty sure, and he's had some success doing it. He actually was on the Speed broadcast back in the early 2010s. Think back when 2011 when Speed went over with Mike Joy and Darrell Waltrip, Leigh Diffey tagged along and was on that broadcast. So I think it's really cool he'll get the chance and opportunity to join the broadcast for Supercars at Adelaide. I think he'll do a really solid and really, really good job on the broadcast. I think it's a big deal for sure. We'll see if any other big personalities are invited to go out to this, but I think this is a really exciting and a great deal for the Supercars broadcast for him to join that broadcast at Adelaide coming up for the Grand Final, which I believe is next weekend, I'm pretty sure. Really cool and exciting stuff overall, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Bilicki. As it was confirmed earlier today that Josh Bilicki will not be returning to DJM Racing in the 2026 NASCAR Riley Auto Parts season. It was confirmed in a post from DJM Racing today, thanking Josh Bilicki for the years of support being with this team and organization. We appreciate everything he's done with this program, and it's sad that he will no longer be with us for the 2026 year. This is now the second driver from the team and organization to confirm that they will not be back with DJM Racing program for 26. Ryan Ellis was the first of the drivers to confirmed that he wouldn't be back with the team next year. Obviously, he will be going over to Young's Motorsports to drive the 02 car in 2026. So I think when we look at Josh Bilicki real quick, I think Josh Bilicki is an extremely underrated driver. Look what he did with Joe Gibbs Racing back in 2024. He drove that 19 car in a few select races, and I gotta say, he was really fast at Portland, had a really strong car in the event, ran top 5 majority of that road course race, and then you look back the other race at the Charlotte Roval. He led a bunch of laps in that race. I think he had a top 5, top 10 car in the event. He had a really fast car that day. So he's really good at road courses. So the big question you have to ask yourself is, where's Josh Bilicki going to go in 2026? To be honest, I am not entirely sure at this point. I really hope he does have a good opportunity. It sounds like he does have something in the works for the 2026 season, but I do think he deserves a great opportunity with a team and organization. I would love to see him in some way, shape, or form make some road course starts with Joe Gibbs Racing in 2026. I'm not sure what's going on with the remainder of the junior motorsports schedule. Obviously, we know that Roger's going to drive the 88 car for a majority of races next year, but we know that 88 car might be open for a few races that the Hendrick guys are not going to run next year because Corey Day is going to be full-time at Hendrick, so I'm not sure at this point. But I hope for Bilicki he can get a good opportunity. I think Josh Bilicki is a talented race car driver who has shown potential in the sport. He's done great things, and he's worked his butt off for the last 10 years to get an opportunity. I hope he does get a chance and an opportunity to be with a really solid team and organization. We'll see where he goes, but I hope he does get a good opportunity in NASCAR for the 2026 season. We'll see if he can perform in 2026. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're talking about Ryan Hunter-Reay. As it was announced earlier today that Ryan Hunter-Reay will be joining Aaron McLaren in a 4th Aaron McLaren racing machine for the 2026 Indianapolis 500. While nothing's been officially confirmed on the number that he is going to run for 2026, the rumored number that he is going to end up running is the number 31. There has been a ton of speculation that Ryan Hunter-Reay was going to be a potential candidate to run for Aaron McLaren for 2026, as of course Kyle Larson had confirmed that he was not going to be running the Indy 500 for 2026, and this opened up an opportunity for a really good driver to get behind the wheel. Now, there was rumors and speculation. I think Jenna Fry brought this up. There was talk about Valentino Rossi potentially being a candidate to run for this team for 2026. And it would have definitely been a really cool story to see Valentino Rossi come over and race an IndyCar. But when you think about experience, Ryan Hunter-Reay brings an incredible amount of experience. And not only that, but he's a former Indy 500 winner back in 2014, where he held off at hard-charging Elio Castroneves, denying Elio at the time his 4th Indianapolis 500 win. Ryan Hunter-Reay will be with one of the fastest organizations in the field. This organization came very close to winning the Indy 500 in 2024 Paddle Award, and I think Ryan Hunter-Reay will have a really strong chance and opportunity. This is going to be the first time I think Ryan Hunter-Reay has been in top-level equipment, because no disrespect to Dry Ryan Bull Racing, but we all can agree that Aaron McLaren is a better organization when it comes to the Indy 500 than Dry Ryan Bull Racing is currently at the moment. So I think that Ryan is going to have a really good opportunity here. I think he is going to be fast, and again, super competitive in this event. He's going to have 3 really strong teammates next year, and Christian Lundgaard next year. Of course, Nolan Siegel, I think, is going to have potential to grow. And then you have, of course, Pat O'Ward, who's come close to winning the championship and also come close to winning the Indy 500 in the past as well. I think you got to put him as one of the favorites already going to next year's Indy 500. I think he'll have a solid chance and opportunity and show some really good potential to potentially have an opportunity to win next year's Indy 500. Again, a great addition for the team and program, and exciting to see that Bill will be with them for the 2026 Indy 500. Excited to see how things go for him in the 2026 Indy 500. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bristol Motor Speedway. Now, we kind of talked about this on the channel earlier this week, but we kind of talked about the fact that there has been a test going on at Bristol Motor Speedway over the course of the last couple days. You had 3 drivers that were at this test, that being, of course, Bubba Wallace from Toyota, Ryan Preece from Ford, and Alex Bowman from Chevrolet. They were testing a bunch of different things at Bristol Motor Speedway. The big thing that everyone kind of knew that they were testing was an increased amount of horsepower. Remember, for the short tracks and the road courses this season, and tracks under 1.5 miles, all those tracks will have 750 horsepower for the 2026 year, and that includes Bristol Motor Speedway. But the other big thing you notice, they have a smaller diffuser on the back, or pretty much no diffuser at all, because they were actually testing the short track package. One question I've always had since we went to basically the racing with the next-gen car is why, for some reason, have we ran the intermediate package at Bristol Motor Speedway? That really never made any sense to me, because when you take a look at the racing of Bristol with the next-gen car, I think the racing has not been that good, in my opinion. Yes, you've had a couple really strong races at the track, but the racing hasn't been great. But I think Bristol is a perfect track to try a lot of different things. Now, Ryan Preece on day number 1 did say that he was actually really happy about the direction things were going. He didn't talk about a lot from day number 2, but it seems like from what Ryan Preece says, he was very encouraged by what he saw during the test and how the test went. And that's really good news here. Now, obviously, Bubba Wallace and Alex Bowman did not get the chance to speak about how the test went, because I believe the media was not allowed to go to that test, which I found to be very interesting. But I do think that this test is definitely really important, because, like I said before, this car made some changes for 2026, and I think everyone knows that the racing at the short tracks and road courses, where I will say the racing this year on the short tracks had gotten a lot better, but it definitely still needed work in progress. I think having a softer tire plus an increased horsepower, which if you listen to the sound that they brought out when they were testing the car, God, that sounds really, really good. But I think that the racing definitely needs to be improved and definitely needs to be better for sure. And I think that what I heard, it was definitely a step in the right direction. I'm hoping that the feedback that they gave from today can be really solid feedback for next year. I hope it can lead to some good things, and hopefully the racing can be good in 2026 on the shorter ovals. I think that's the most important thing at this point, is that the racing gets better on those types of tracks. Hopefully that can be the case, and we can get some good racing in 2026 on the shorter tracks and the road courses in the 2026 year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about John Force. As John Force did officially confirm earlier this evening that he's officially announcing retirement from the NHRA effective immediately. John Force, we all know, is the greatest driver to race in the NHRA ever. We all know also, unfortunately, that I believe about a year or so ago, he was involved in an unfortunate crash in the NHRA, where he got involved and basically had one of the most serious crashes we have seen in NHRA history. And since then, he has been sidelined from racing. He explained the big reason so he could take care of his family, and especially with him getting a lot older, he doesn't want to risk it at this point anymore. And to be honest, for John Force, I don't blame him. I believe John Force is like 75 or 76, I'm pretty sure. And plus, John Force has been able to accomplish a lot in motorsports and be the greatest driver to race in the NHRA ever. Congratulations, John Force, on an incredible career. His team will still continue in 2026. They'll have some association with other people coming in next year. And this organization will be looking to win a lot of races going forward in the 2026 year. It just won't be with John Force behind the wheel in the 2026 year. But like I said, congratulations, John Force, on an incredible career in the NHRA. It's going to be sad to see him no longer racing in the 2026 year, but at the same time, I do truly think he is making the right decision for himself, for his health, for his family, among other things. He's got grandchildren as well he said he's got to take care of, and I think that's the most important thing, is your family at this point. The racing comes second, the family comes first. I think he's making the right decision for his career, but again, though, congratulations, John Force, on an incredible career, and thank you for everything you've done for the NHRA. Hope to see you at the racetrack, just not behind the wheel, but again, congratulations on a great career in the NHRA. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about costs. Now, earlier today, there was a really good article, I believe, from Aidan McHugh, who actually works, I believe, as a crew chief for Cope Racing Family currently at the moment, and I believe has had some association with the ECR and RCR team and organization in the last couple of years. And he wrote an article talking about full costs when it comes to cost for not just the top lean teams, but also some of the mid-pack teams in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series going into 2026. He talked about the purse money and in general costs. Now, the big thing he took a look at was the purse money, and it seems like it's a pretty standard-sized purse money that they have for the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. I think he said it was like $1,651,929, and then of course with some of the other big events like the Mexico race, I think it went up to like 2.3 or 2.4 million across the board. I think he mentioned that the championship championship race this year had around 2.5 to 2.6 million for the event, but in general, the costs kind of remain the same. Despite that, he mentioned how much it could cost for like the engine leasing, because of course the Kaulig Racing family team had an association with ECR, and talk about a lot of the other big costs as well when it comes to engines, when it comes to fabrication. I suggest going and reading the article, because we've kind of heard a lot of things about how much it costs some of these mid-pack or smaller teams. We know it costs a lot of money to run a team and organization, because if you want to have success in motorsports, you do have to pay a lot for your team to have a lot of success. It's always said that in racing, if you want to make a small fortune, big fortune, you have to basically pay a lot of money and pay a lot to have success in motorsports. But I just find it so interesting looking at that article, and I think there's a lot of really interesting things that he brings up in there that I just found extremely interesting when it comes to certain things and aspects of motorsports, because we all know the cost of motorsports has gone up. There's been a lot of issues, of course, with funding, which is one of the big reasons why the secondary series will have more Cup Series drivers. Also with the Truck Series, same thing as well. You're going to have more Cup drivers that are going to be showing up next year, and because I think the costs are a big reason, and sponsorship is a big reason at this point as well. So in general, there's some things that I do agree with on certain aspects going on, but I think it's certainly interesting to kind of look at for sure. And again, I suggest going and reading the article, because you go and find some really interesting things about NASCAR and the current costs that are going on in the sport currently at this particular moment. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chevrolet. Now, we know there's a big story coming around when it comes to Chevrolet at some point later today. And by the time many of you watch this video, you probably have already seen the post. But Rick Hendrick did confirm earlier this week on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, I do believe on Wednesday, he confirmed that there will be a new Chevy body that is going to be announced sometime later today by the time many of you are watching this video. He basically said that fans should not be having to wait way too long to see what the body is going to be, and will be unveiling it in the not so distant future. There, of course, has been a ton of speculation around what the new Chevrolet body could be for 2026, because Chevrolet will be getting a new body for next year. The big reason being is because the Chevy Camaro body they've been using has been used, I believe, since like 2022 or 2023, and the other manufacturers have had body changes in the last couple of years. Ford had their new Mustang that came out a couple years ago. They transitioned in 2024. And then Toyota had their new Camry that came out in 2024 as well. They transitioned there. And you look at Chevy, they've had less wins every single year. Yes, of course, they went on to win the championship in the Cup Series this year. Same with the Xfinity Series. But they also know that their performance hasn't been as strong. And outside of Hendrick Motorsports, you can tell some of these teams have been struggling, like RCR and Trackhouse Racing and Spire in a sense. And other teams like Kaulig Racing, for example, who don't really have their association with Chevrolet much anymore, because they're going to be going over to Dodge and Ram when that happens. So I think the big question we have to ask ourselves is, what is this new Chevrolet body going to be? Is it going to be a variant of the Camaro? It is certainly possible. There's a lot of people that bring up the Blazer. The Blazer, from a lot of people, think that is potentially what the new body is going to look like. A lot of people are looking at that EV Blazer that Chevrolet has. I think Supercars are transitioning over to Blazer in some way, shape, or form in 2026 or 2027. So it definitely would make a lot of sense if that was what the body they ended up using. Some mention like the AVO. The AVO looks like a little bit of a compact car, so I'm not sure if the AVO, how that would entirely work. I think they got a more sedan looking like car, so maybe that's the body they use. There's a couple other different bodies that I noticed, but I'm very interested to see what body Chevrolet is going to use in 2026, because it seems like for a lot of people, especially that are on the fans of the Chevy side of things, they seem like that whatever it is going to help Chevrolets in a really, really big way get that success back and kind of continue being the top manufacturer and continue winning a lot of races going forward. Because regardless of what happens, that's probably going to be the template, because NASCAR used the Camaro template for a while with the next gens, and that's why we saw a ton of success for Chevrolet for a long time. It could affect Chevy somewhat at the beginning of the year, but I think by the end of the year, you're going to see a lot of success from Chevrolet, especially Hendrick Motorsports too. So I'm excited to see what the new body is going to be for 2026, but I think it's really interesting. I'll be excited to see what that body is for next year, and I can't wait to see what it will end up being for 2026, what that new body is truly going to look like for Chevrolet. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the in-season challenge. As we'll talk about the start times here just a little bit, but one thing that was officially confirmed when it was announced with the start times is that the in-season challenge will be returning the TNT in 2026. For 2026, the 5 races that will be part of the schedule will be Sonoma as the first race, then they'll race at Chicagoland, then they will race at Atlanta Motor Speedway, also known as Echo Park Speedway, which I still call it Atlanta. Then the race at North Wilkesboro, and as for the first point-paying race at that track since 1996. And then, of course, finally, it will be at the Brickyard 400 at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I think the concept of the in-season tournament at the beginning, I actually really like the concept of the in-season tournament. I think that it made sense for something like that to happen, and it wasn't really anything for points or anything like that. It was just for bragging rights. You could have a bracket, and not only could a driver win $1 million, but also a fan could win $1 million as well if their brackets were correct. But there was one big problem with the first year of the in-season tournament. The big problem was the fact, quintessentially, they had Atlanta Motor Speedway opening up as the first race of the in-season tournament. If you're going to do a tournament like this, you can't have a super speedway as your first event. So I think they made the right decision to move Atlanta to the middle race of the year. Because instead of having 32 drivers and a lot of brackets getting screwed up, you only have 8 drivers at that point competing, and it's the middle race, and you only have 4 drivers that go through. So I think that is a big improvement in general. While Sonoma can be a chaotic track and it will benefit some drivers who are really good at road courses, I do think in general having Sonoma open up is definitely better than having Atlanta open it up. And then you have a track like Chicagoland, for example, being the second race. That race could be a wild card and wide open too, but it's not going to be the same wild card as a track like Atlanta Motor Speedway or Echo Park. So I think they made the right decision when it came to the in-season tournament to moving things around. I liked some of the things in the in-season tournament for 2026. I think it's a lot better for sure. I think there's definitely some big improvements for this year, and I think they did a better job. You're probably going to have better storylines around it, and in general, $1 million. Again, it's not for points, so I like the in-season challenge, and I'm probably going to do a video talk about who I think will win depending on who's in the bracket, because I don't know how the qualifying is going to work. I'm not sure if it'll be similar to what it was for 2025, where they had the system the way it was. I'll be interested to see how things go and how they do the bracket system for next year. We'll see where things kind of go, but again, pretty excited to see the in-season tournament and challenge will be returning once again in 2026. I like a lot of things about it, and good to see that it will be back in 2026. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, we talked about the story on the channel earlier this week, but it was officially confirmed over the week that Kyle Busch will be back running the Snowball Derby in 2025, as he'll be going for the Max Dawson Trophy for the 3rd time in 2025. His crew chief for the event will be Danny Stockman. Kyle Busch has competed in the Snowball Derby many, many times before, and he has also had a ton of success in the Snowball Derby as well. He's not only won the event once, but he's won it twice. I think his last time he won was around 2015 or 2016, I'm pretty sure, and he also won the event, I believe, in the late 2000s as well. The Snowball Derby is also the race where Kyle Busch discovered a driver named Eric Jones. After Eric Jones won the 2012 Snowball Derby, Kyle Busch gave him the opportunity. He connected him with Toyota and led to Kyle Busch getting Eric Jones to drive for Kyle Busch Motorsports, and then the rest is history. But a lot of big name drivers have won the Snowball Derby. Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott, Caden Honeycutt, Ty Majeski, Derek Thorne's won the event. I think Derek Cross has won the event, I'm pretty sure. Other drivers have won in recent years. I think Johanna Long's actually won the Snowball Derby over the last 15, 20 years. I mentioned, of course, Eric Jones, who's won it. Chandler Smith won it in 2021. Noah Gragson won it back in 2017. The Snowball Derby is a who's who of drivers, and you always get a lot of big-name drivers that do show up to the Snowball Derby every single year. And I think Kyle Busch showing up is no exception. Now, he will also have Lucas Oil as a sponsor on the car, and this will be on Flow Racing as well for those who are wanting to watch Kyle Busch race in this event. I think expectations do have to be pretty high for Kyle Busch in this year's Snowball Derby, because while, yes, Kyle Busch may not be as good of, which he still is a very good driver, by the way, looking at what he did on some of the dirt stuff, basically when they ran the races at the Tulsa Shootout, but Kyle Busch was definitely pretty competitive in races. It's just that his tenure at RCR wasn't very good at time, but I think that it's good to see they'll get the chance and opportunity to work with Danny Stockman. Danny Stockman, I think, also had previous success in the Snowball Derby, I'm pretty sure, working with different drivers over the years. And I think that it's cool that we're going to see Kyle Busch back in it. There's a lot of other big-name drivers that are still needing to be announced at this point that have not been officially confirmed for the Snowball Derby at this point that, again, I do expect to be announced in the not-so-distant future on that front. But I really like that he's back in the Snowball Derby in 2026, and I really hope we do see like a Chase Elliott come out there. I would expect people like a Chandler Smith, maybe a Noah Gragson, as he runs it every year. Carson Osbar will either be in the commentary booth or will be in the event. You're probably going to have Caden Honeycutt, who's a defending winner. You're probably going to have Ty Majeski show up, and you're probably going to have Bubba Pollard also out there, and some other big-name drivers like Lee Pullman, for example, competing in the event, and you might have some other drivers from different facets coming out and running the Snowball Derby this year, maybe even the Snowflake 100 as well. So we'll see how things go for Kyle Busch, but like I said, excited to see that he will be back running the Snowball Derby in 2025. We'll see if he can get that third Snowball Derby and get that Max Dawson trophy once again next year, or this year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the start times and the networks for 2026 on the NASCAR Cup, the Craftsman Truck Series, and the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. Now, I did a video covering the story on the channel earlier this week. If you haven't checked that video, I suggest going and checking it out. But like I mentioned, all three series schedules and times and everything has been officially announced for 2026. So let's begin by talking about all the networks. Let's first begin by talking about some new additions for the main broadcast side over the year. So for the NASCAR Cup Series next year, there actually will be one addition on main TV networks for 2026, and that is going to be the Kansas Spring Cup race. That race will move from FS1 to Fox, and that will be a Sunday afternoon race, I believe at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fox. So that means we'll have one more race on broadcast in 2026. Like I mentioned in the video, the more race that can be over the air, the better it is for the sport. Because as much as I think that FS1 will probably get more viewership than, let's say, USA or NBC Sports Network or even Prime or whatever, you can definitely tell the less people have FS1. So getting more races over the air and having more races on main broadcast, I think that is a change that needs to happen more and more consistently as time goes on. And I think Kansas makes a lot of sense. The racing in Kansas is always really, really good. So it's a perfect track to go on Fox. Again, there's still a majority race that will be on USA or the streaming side of things, but basically you'll have at least one new race over the air in 2026. Another big change that many people probably haven't talked about, the Southern 500 is going to be starting an hour earlier in 2026 than it does in 2025. What this means is that which usually starts at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, it will start at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So while the race will basically start in the daytime, which will start in the mid-afternoon going in the evening, it will transition in the night, but it won't go as far into the night as it has in prior years. I think this is a decent change in my opinion, because they're going to get that true day-to-night transition like the Coca-Cola 600 has been for a long time. So I actually think this change is a solid change in general. Let's move on to talk about some new night races for 2026. There are going to be 3 straight night races in a row, and TNT will have pretty much almost all the races except 1 or 2 of them that will be at night. North Wilkesboro will be a night points paint event in 2026. So it'll be the first points paint event in North Wilkesboro that has been a night race. That will be at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on a Sunday night. And then Chicagoland will also be on a Sunday night as well on July the 5th at 6 or 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I've got no issue with Chicagoland being a Sunday night race. I think especially with how hot it can get and how muggy it can get in the middle of July, you want that race being a night event. So I think that's a good change. It'll also be the first night Chicagoland Cup Series race technically that started at night since I believe 2010. You did have the race in 2013 that went tonight, but of course that did not start at the night, it started in the daytime, but it will be the first transitional there. And then for the Truck Series, they will have 2 races on main Fox in 2026. The first one being the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg. That, of course, in promotion with the IndyCar race going on there at that same time. And also Charlotte Roval will be on Fox as well for the Truck Series. A lot of races in the late afternoon on Fridays. I think there's some of those races that should be at night. I think the Roval should not be starting as late as it is, especially with lights. Will probably temporary lights will start like 5 p.m. Eastern. Talladega should not be starting at 3 Central Standard Time. That should be probably starting at 2 if you're going to start earlier or just run that Saturday night at this point. I think there's some decent changes to the schedule for 2026 on the scheduling side of things. You have a lot more Sunday night races, less Saturday night races. The Atlanta race is a Sunday night event in 2026. You also have some of the other races, like San Diego is going to be starting, I believe, at 5 p.m. Eastern. Sonoma is going to be starting around that same time as well. And then, of course, you have a lot of races on the CW. Every one of those will be on the CW, so that will be consistent. But I believe that the Darlington Fall race before the Xfinity event will be a night race next year, and there's some other big races that will be coming up in 2026 as well. In general, I think there's some good things around the start times for 2026. I like some of the things around it. In general, I think there's sort of positive things when it comes to some of the start times for the NASCAR schedule for 2026. Again, notable things, San Diego being on the schedule again, Chicago being on the schedule. And I think it does benefit some drivers for those events going into 2026. Some exciting stuff around that, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Kaulig Racing once again. Now, we have talked a lot about Kaulig Racing on the channel over the course of the last week or so, and that is because there's been a lot of rumblings and rumors and speculation around Kaulig Racing over the course of the last couple of days. The big rumor that's been going around, and this originated from the Kaulig Nation account, also originated from Mike Skinner and Angie Skinner's show they do on Sirius XM, which like the Skinner Roundup, I'm pretty sure. They talked about this rumor on their show. The big rumor that's been circulating is that Tony Stewart and Kasey Kahne could both be potential candidates to join the Dodge Ram team for the Craftsman Truck Series in 2026. Now, it does need to be made perfectly clear that this is just still a rumor at this point and nothing is officially finalized and confirmed. If they do come back next year, it will not be on a full-time basis. It also likely will not associate them with their Cup Series program for 2026, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But it would likely be a one-off or two-off in 2026. And Chris Rice has actually asked this question on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio earlier today. And Chris Rice basically said that we do not have any contracts yet with Tony Stewart and Kasey Kahne for 2026. Do we talk about a lot of these drivers currently at the moment? Absolutely. We've talked about guys like Scott Riggs, who is Lane Riggs' father. We've talked about other drivers who have been associated with the Dodge and Ram program in the past in the Craftsman Truck Series. But we still don't have contracts yet at this point. What I find very interesting is that he says we don't have contracts yet. He did not flat out deny that they probably have had some talks internally about potentially bringing Tony Stewart and Kasey Kahne in. And if anybody knows what goes on with Chris Rice, sometimes Chris Rice will say something on a show, and then sometimes he'll say, oh, this thing is not happening, and then it will happen. For instance, look at the Ty Dillon spotter firing, for example. They said a 10-team did nothing wrong in Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and then Joe White got fired from the organization a couple hours after that show ended up taking place. And then you have the Ram rumors where Kaulig Racing denied the rumors initially, and then they basically went to Ram. So I do think that there is some truth to these rumors with Tony Stewart and Kasey Kahne. Now again, like I mentioned a second ago, it would not be a full-time thing. It'd be like a one-off or a two-off. Kasey Kahne would make a lot of sense. Kasey's expressed interest coming back into sport, maybe making a few starts in 2026. Yes, he does have association with HendrickCars.com, so that's something you kind of have to work around if that would end up happening. But I do think Kasey Kahne coming back and racing the sport would be a really, really big deal. And for Tony Stewart, this one kind of surprising when the rumors started circulating, but I do think there is truth to the fact that Tony Stewart could come back in some way, shape, or form in 2026, maybe for like a one-off at this point, because the only reason Tony Stewart also, by the way, would likely come back is because of the Stellantis partnership. It wouldn't be because Tony Stewart really wants to come back. Obviously, Tony Stewart has been frustrated with NASCAR in recent years and hasn't liked the direction the sport has been going. He said that's one of the reasons why he left the sport overall not too long ago, and that's one of the reasons Stewart-Haas Racing no longer exists at this point. But it's interesting that Tony Stewart could be coming back in 26. Now, continuing on with some of the other rumors, a lot of talk about sponsorship. It seems like Ram and Dodge may be sponsoring the Cup Series program in 2026. They only have 9 to 12 races, according to what Chris Rice said, that is scheduled for next year. They also have some other big announcements that are exciting around the program, and they said that they were supposed to start announcing stuff not too long ago, and I know that they were supposed to make some announcements the last week or so, but those announcements still have not happened yet for 2026. But there's some big stuff happening with Stellantis. You've got the Gong Show going on, which I think there's some really exciting stuff, and some drivers that are part of that, like a Landon Huffman, like a Connor Jones, which isn't really that exciting. A Donovan Strauss, for example, among other drivers have been associated. But they've also got really strong drivers in their program for the Truck Series team next year. The two big names, of course, are Justin Haley and Brendan Quinn, and then you have Daniel Dye, but he's not going to be a championship contender. But Brendan Quinn and Justin Haley are going to be championship threats next year. And then, of course, you have rumors of people like Christian Nequez and Daniel Hemrick who could be candidates as well for this program, but they've been denied. And then, of course, we'll find out what's going on with the All-Star truck for next year. But it's interesting that Chris Rice went on a podcast or a show and didn't really flat out deny it. He kind of acknowledged it, and it's interesting that he brings it up, which tells me, yeah, there's probably truth at this point that there's a good possibility that we are going to see in some way, shape, or form this happen where we may see Tony Stewart in case he came back in the sport. I think that's certainly exciting. I hope it happens because I think it would be really cool for the sport if both those guys came back and were in the sport in some way, shape, or form. We'll see if they do, in fact, end up coming back to the sport in the near future. We'll see if that does end up happening in 2026. And now we're going to jump on to the next big story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports trial. Now, we talked about the story a little bit on the channel yesterday. If you haven't checked out the full video, I suggest going and checking it out. But we basically talked a lot about some of the things that happened. So let's go back and talk about what's been happening in recent weeks. So, pre-trials happened a couple days ago between NASCAR and 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. They are beginning to get into position for a trial that's supposed to initially take place on December 1st. However, a couple weeks back, there was some talk about a potential settlement that could happen between NASCAR and 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. According to an article from Jordan Bianchi, even Adam Stern as well, it seems like they were making progress toward a settlement according to them. It sounded like they had agreed to potentially having permanent charters for 2026, making them as permanent as possible, and also making other things that help, basically letting them help on the negotiating table for the upcoming TV deal, which those negotiations are supposed to start, I believe, in 2029, going into 2030, so we're about 3 or 4 years from those negotiations beginning for new TV networks in 2026, and wouldn't just be for the TV deal, but also be for the media revenue that will be transitioned to all these teams and organizations. And then there was a lot of talk about a settlement, and then, of course, legal fees came into play. Well, according to what was put out by Bob Proctor yesterday, basically the judge kind of also thought that the request from Rick Hendrick and NASCAR and Roger Penske that they could only get asked certain questions in this case. He thought it was absolutely lunacy, and he kind of thought it was ludicrous. They tried to ask that, and he basically said that you can't basically get away with it at this point. You're going to be asked whatever questions 2011 Front Row Motorsports get asked. You probably should have been added to the witness list as it is. And he basically ruled that unless NASCAR takes them off the witness list and gets rid of them, they're going to be asked a ton of questions at this point. But continuing on, the pre-trial is officially complete, and according to what it looks like, there is a trial officially set for December 1st. Now, they mentioned that it seems like they feel confident that they can get the trial done in 10 days. A lot of people think it could take 2 to 3 weeks for this trial to get done. Both parties feel confident they'll get it done in 2 weeks, which I do have a funny feeling at this point that this trial will probably last a lot longer than 10 days. I know both sides are saying it's going to last only 2 days, but I do have a feeling that this will last longer than 2 days going forward into the future. Continuing on with the jury side of things, it seems like they are going to be selecting a jury. In fact, I think that jury sub was supposed to take place. And I think that 9-panel jury, I think it's so there isn't a unanimous ruling in the situation where basically you have just 2 sides and you can't have basically a stalemate. You'll have at least one side, and that'll be the person who likely wins the suit. And then, of course, you do have the witnesses. There's going to be 35 to 36 witnesses that are going to be there, and it looks like 8 or 9 of them are going to be truly selected. I think it was also mentioned that certain revenue streams are not going to be needed, like Michael Jordan's and Jim France's revenue, I'm pretty sure were mentioned, they're not going to be needed, which I find to be very interesting. So it seems to me like Curtis Polk and Steve Phelps and Denny Hamlin, all the other people, they basically are going to have to share some of that stuff, and I think they're involved with depositions too. A couple people like Jim France and Curtis Polk are not going to have to go through, I believe, the depositions, but Rick Hendrick and Roger Penske are also going to be involved with those depositions, and they'll get asked a lot of questions from Jeffrey Kessler and other lawyers as well. Now, one big thing we kind of talked about a second ago is that, again, we had heard some talk about a potential settlement between NASCAR and 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. It seems like no settlement will likely come into effect, unfortunately, at this time. Now, this doesn't mean that there cannot be a settlement that is reached, because there is still a potential possibility that a settlement could be reached between NASCAR and 2311 and Front Row Motorsports, and I'm not denying that that could certainly be a possibility. But as of right now, the longer we go with this case, we're on November 13th at the time recording this video, the longer this case goes, the more likely we're not going to reach a settlement. I think it's becoming less and less likely at this point that is unfortunately going to happen, where we're going to go to trial. I really wish that we could find a way to settle, because a lot of team owners, they're wanting this case to be settled. They don't want to go to trial at this point. Team owners have expressed their interest, like Brad Keselowski, Rick Hendrick, and Roger Penske, who are going to have to be deposed in the case. And other people have asked for this. I believe not Justin Marks, but other team owners, like Gordon Smith from Hayek Motorsports. I believe other team owners in the sport, like Joe Gibbs, have expressed that he really doesn't want this lawsuit to go on going forward. I think majority of the industry at this point is ready for a settlement to be reached. But it seems like there's both sides don't want a settlement reached. Now, NASCAR, it's clear as day that they want a settlement, because they feel like at this point that they don't feel like they have a chance, the best chance. Now, one thing to note is that the judge in this case, Kenneth Bell, basically said that 2011 Racing and Farmer Motorsport should not feel confident they're going to get everything they want in the case. And the problem when it comes to legal fees, among other things, they're not going to get everything they entirely want. So that's probably going to hurt them a little bit and not make them happy in that situation, because 2011 Racing Front Row, despite the fact that they're ones that initially negotiated and basically were the ones that started the lawsuit officially in the first place, they're not going to want to basically pay any of the legal fees at this point, which I can't entirely blame them, but I think they also should have to pay some of the legal fees, but NASCAR also should have to pay some of them at this point, and I think that's going to be something to pay attention to as well on that front too when it comes to that. But I think at this point, when it comes to this lawsuit right now, I think, again, it's still very wide open on who is going to win the lawsuit. I think regardless of what happens, there's no true winners in this lawsuit. I think there's really not going to be a winner in this case, and I think it's pretty wide open on exactly what is going to happen for the upcoming. And if NASCAR loses the suit, are they going to be forced to sell off the tracks? They may have to sell them off. The charter agreement could either be changed or go away completely altogether. I think there's a lot of repercussions that people don't realize at this point, and regardless how you feel, I think the fact they haven't reached a settlement at this point tells me we're likely going to trial, and it seems like it's set for December 1st. It'll be interesting to follow and see how things go for the remainder of the trial, and we'll see if that trial does end up happening. But I think that there are certain things that are going to come out on the trial going forward that are going to be interesting, and we'll probably get more information on that front as time progresses and goes on. We'll see how long the trial does last in the future. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about the NASCAR Championship / playoff format once again for 2026. Now, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of conversation surrounding the championship and the playoff format for 2026 ever since the championship officially ended in 2025. And there's been a ton of talk about it throughout the last year, really always going all the way back to 2024 when Joey Logano won the championship, despite the fact Joey Logano had a 17th place average finish and had the least amount of top 5s and top 10s for a champion in series history. Well, those talks are continuing to hit up once again. There continue to be a lot of rumors circulating around the championship and playoff format for 2026. And according to what Mike Ford has said, it sounds like, according to what he said on the podcast a couple days ago, it seems like the championship format is still undecided at this point. But according to Matt Weaver, it sounds more likely that we're going to have still some sort of playoff format for the 2026 year. Now, whether that is a 10-race chase or the 3-3-4 format, that is still to be determined at this point. But it seems like we all are in agreement in the industry that the one-race championship will not be coming back in 2026. Then, there has been a lot of polls that have circulated on Twitter and social media. And if you go to X and even YouTube as well, there's been a lot of posts that have been circulating about the polls about how people prefer when it comes to the format. When you take a look at the three options that have been the front runners, you have 3-3-4, you have the chase, and then you have the full season. Every single post I've seen, the majority of people on those posts who poll, they want full season. And those polls sometimes get 10,000 people voting. Sometimes those polls get a few thousand. But I've noticed this even in the poll that I put out. Majority of fans, especially after the Xfinity race, when I put my poll out on X, majority of fans wanted a full season championship back. Now, there were definitely a lot of people who also wanted the 10-race chase back, but no one really wanted the 3-3-4 format back in general. Then, of course, you had Jordan Bianchi earlier today, who tried to misrepresent what a lot of people are saying. He basically saying that 2/3 of fans from people that went to Phoenix, their championship race, basically want a playoff format in some way, shape, or form. I think that people that are going just to the championship race are probably there because they actually like the championship race and the championship format, but also probably there to see their favorite drivers race. Some fans that go to races, guess what? They don't really care about the championship format and they just want to see good racing in general. And I think most people, when you look at the people on social media that have social media, for example, that have voted, majority of them do not want to see the platform that we currently have, or they want to see the 3-3-4 format. And then earlier tonight, there's a post of service from Adam Stern, where Adam Stern basically did confirm that NASCAR is continuing to have talks and conversations, and right before the championship race ended up taking place, they sounded like they were very close and said they were going to have some sort of playoff format in some way, shape, or form for 2026, but they're still not officially decided on what the format is going to be for 2026 at this point. When people saw that post from Adam Stern, a lot of people were definitely upset that the playoffs are probably going to be back in some way, shape, or form in 2026. Now, again, like I mentioned, there are 3 formats that are in the running: 3-3-4, 10-race chase, and then, of course, the full season format. And I think judging by how the fans reacted, a lot of fans don't even want to see the word playoffs mentioned when it comes to the championship. And I entirely agree. I really don't understand why NASCAR is trying to use the word playoffs. Why don't we just call it the chase for crying out loud? Because in the playoffs, in racing, we don't play. We race. How about calling it the chase, for example? I think at least calling it the chase for the championship sounds a lot better off the tongue than the playoffs. But if they have to keep using playoffs, I guess that's what's going to be. But there still is talk of a playoff format in some way, shape, or form is very, very concerning to me. Again, when I hear the word playoffs, I think a 3-3-4. And I'm going to explain why a 3-3-4 format will not work. Yes, the only positive comes out of 3-3-4 is you have a little bit of bigger sample size. Points are going to matter a lot more at the 3-3-4 than basically having a one-race championship. So that's probably the only positive that you get out of this. But there's some issues. Number one, you have Talladega in the final 4 races of the year. That's not a big enough sample size. If you're going to do the 3-3-4, you can't have Talladega in the final round. You got to take Talladega out. The other big question is, how many people are going to be allowed in there? That's the big question you have to ask yourself. Are they going to allow 16, or are they going to eliminate 6 and then 4? What are they going to do on that front? I'm just really confused if they go to 3-3-4, because you're still also going to have the issues of eliminations, which could lead to a lot of manipulation. I think that's one thing that NASCAR really needs to get away from, is manipulation in the sport. And if you have the playoffs come back like we've had, or even close to that, manipulation is going to come into play. Then you have the 10-race chase. The 10-race chase is a compromise. I think the 10-race chase can work a little better now than it used to. One of the big problems with the original 10-race chase is the tracks did not change that much. That's why Jimmy Johnson won 6 of his 7 titles under the chase format, because they figured out what tracks they needed to hone in on, and they never really changed the tracks. You had maybe a few like Auto Club being in and out of the playoffs. You had Atlanta moved in and out of the playoffs, but that's pretty much the only changes you really had. You had the same final race. You have Phoenix really close to the end of the year. You basically had almost the same schedule near the end of the year, and that's why Jimmy Johnson and his team figured it out. Now, you can't really do that because they keep changing the races for the playoffs every year. This upcoming year, for example, Homestead's the final race this season. You've got other tracks like Phoenix moving back a little earlier in the year. It's not the same schedule from 2025. New Hampshire is no longer in the playoffs this year. So you have less of the same consistency going on, and I think that will lead to things being a little bit better. But the issue you still have the potential possibility of manipulation. NASCAR needs to get away from the manipulation side of things. And I understand you're not going to get fully away from that, but the less manipulation you can have in a sport in general, the better I think it's going to be. I think a 10-race chase, though, can work a little better. Even Mark Martin agrees that a 10-race chase could work. Also, it's fine if you have a couple wild cards if you're going to do it, and also you have to keep playoff points in because you need to have a buffer. You can't go back to the Lafford system the way they did for Lafford and all that stuff. You can't do that. But the one I'm mostly for is full season. Now, it seems like full season may be off the table, unfortunately, which is disappointing to hear. And it's definitely making me a little upset about it because, personally, I think full season is the best way to crown a champion. It's the most legitimate. And I get there might be some negatives that you might have someone that just runs away with the championship early. But that doesn't happen all the time. It happened, yes, sometimes. There's no denying that. It happened in 2003, Matt Kenseth winning the title, and that's because winning didn't matter as much because the winner didn't get that many points, and that's why drivers would not always go for wins because the winner basically didn't sometimes get as many points as second place. And then you think about 2001, that one ended a little earlier, but again, consistency is a very important thing to look at on that front. If we are going to do a full season championship, and if we're going to do that, you have to basically award more points to the winner of the race. The winner should get the most points. There's no reason, any way, shape, or form, that second or third or fourth, even with stage wins, if those come in, there's no reason that second or third should be able to get more points than first. The winner of the race should have more points without question. That would make winning a lot more of an incentive, and you keep the same racing going on. Because if the racing's good, the race is going to be good, and people will tune in no matter what. Because the full season format's not going to be magical, that bring everybody back. I get that, but I think the full season format would be the best way to crown the champion. But judging by what's being said at this point, it's more than likely going to be some sort of playoff format, some way, shape, or form. Not the biggest fan of it, in my honest opinion, but it is what it is. If I don't want to go 3-3-4 for the love of God. We go 3-3-4. I'm going to blow a gasket because 3-3-4 is not the way to crown a champion. We'll see what kind of format they use. Because if we go to the chase, at least you have a more legitimate champion, and you probably would have had a lot of the similar champions you had now, except maybe Joey Logano, of course. But then, like 2018, under chase format, Logano would have won it, which he won a title under the format we got. Then he had like Kurt Busch win the title in 2004, which people question that a little bit, but I think Kurt deserves it. People question Tony's championship in 11, which I don't understand because Tony Stewart was great that year. And I think that it would be a lot fairer for a chase, but I think full season is the way to go, and I hope that's the format we end up using in 2026, in my opinion. So that is going to be for today's Law NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go more of that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. What championship format do you think NASCAR will use in 26? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about the other stories talk about, like the lawsuit? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. There's going to be another video probably coming today, talk about the new Chevy body that's coming in 2026. That's going to be announced some point later today. And if any other major news breaks, we'll discuss it live on the channel. Then Saturday, I'm probably going to talk about the top free agents going into 2026 for 2027. And then, of course, we also will talk about some other big videos as well. We're going to talk about drivers who need to step up over the next couple weeks. And then, of course, on Sunday, we're going to have the winter predictions for 2026 for Cup. And then on Monday, we're going to have an NASCAR news video, something else dropping on the channel, and a silly season update should be coming in the next 2 weeks as well. We're going to talk about people like Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bolas, Ross Chastain, Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, Frankie Muniz, Kyle Larson, Chase Leigh, Brian Priest, Brad Keselowski, Cletus Farn, Dodge Ram, Will Brown, Brad Feeney, Cam Waters, Connor Zilch, Junior Motorsports, Daniel Suarez, among other things as well. We got a lot of fun content dropping in the coming days and coming weeks as well, and also expect the Daytona 500 entrance video in the next couple weeks too. And the Cup predictions will be coming in the next 2 weeks as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.